good. I feel like lower lecture yesterday so far.
So it's prelims.
Yeah, that's fair.
I guess we can get
Dude, we have like
started.
this using a few numbers.
Yeah. Um, yes, still people coming in. While we're waiting, you guys can join the Kahoot. Um, yes, we have 11 in total. It's the same. Sharing my screen. So we can just get started. People can join as we're going on. Yeah. I think it's week 4, but yeah, that's fine. Um, the first question is a question from last week that most people didn't get right, so I put it there again just to revise. Okay, that's great. Most people got it right this time. So yeah, like basically declarative programming is like in declarative programming, the UI is automatically updated when the state changes, as opposed to just explicitly calling the function to update the UI. We can go to the next question. Yeah. Oh, so I guess this is a pretty common like mix up, I guess. So I think remember is also the next question. So I'll go to the next question and then explain both of them. Yeah. Okay, most of you got this one right. So I'll explain buy and remember really quickly. So as it says, what remember does is it remembers the state of the state of the variable across recomposition, so it's not reinitialized when the UI is like recomposed. And what by does is by makes the state variable act as like a regular variable, so you can access a value without calling like the variable name dot value. We can go to the next question. Wait, Halloween music.
Yes.
Hey, yeah, most of you got it right. I guess like the two like confusing answers are imperative or declarative. The other two I just put there because I didn't have anything else to put there. But yeah, so reactive UI, as I explained what declarative programming was in the first question, it's like basically the UI updating itself when the state changes. And that basically is what reactive UI is. And I think there's one more question. Um, This one doesn't have a right answer, even though it says it'll say it has a right answer, but you guys can read it anything. Oh, well, that's nice to see. I'm glad everyone liked the assignment. Speaking of the assignment, I think that will be one of the announcements. Let's look at the leaderboard first. Congrats to everyone on the leaderboard. Um, yeah, let's get right into the lecture. Wait 1 second. And we do the Kahoot. So, some quick announcements about the second assignment. This is completely like on an issue on our end. Um, Unfortunately, like the student database was accidentally deleted, and while you guys all have been added to CMSX, you guys will have to resubmit P2 so that we can like grade it again. And the due date has been extended, so it should be fine. I think it's by end of day tomorrow. And P3 is due this Sunday. Instructions are already on the course textbook, so you guys can get started on it early. And we can get on to the lecture now. Okay, before I get started with the lecture,
Oh, we have a question.
oh, sorry.
You want me to discuss this?
I no, it's fine. P1's not graded, so I think it should be fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is oh yes.
Okay, before I get started with the lecture, I'll just say that the three topics we're doing today is very different and not very related to each other. So it might feel like a lot of information. So if you have any questions, please raise your hand and please let us know. And yeah, we can just get started with the lecture. So let's see what animations are. So last week we looked at like UI recompositions when the variable changes. So like when let's say the counter changes, it's like reflected on the UI, right? But you might have noticed that those recompositions, they're very sudden, so it's not smooth, it's not aesthetically pleasing, it just changes immediately. And we can use animations to make it like make it look better, make it aesthetically more pleasing and give like better visual feedback. So let's say you're like the user is pressing a button and we could use animations to give the user like some form of visual feedback to notify that the button has been pressed. So I think you might have noticed this in like some apps, but like when the button is pressed, sometimes it like gets smaller, gets bigger. That's done with animations. So oh, not oh okay. This is an example. Let me see. This is eatery. So what I want you to focus on is this header right here. Oh, I wish it was like it keeps playing. Okay, so You s
You can right click and loop it, I'm pretty sure.
oh yeah. Okay, so you see when like you scroll up, the size of the header changes, but it's not sudden. It's like it's very subtle, but you can see a somewhat smooth transition here, right? And this is basically what we're doing in animations. Um, but yeah, we oh so we'll look at four functions Jetpack Compose provides for animations, and there's more, but these four are like the basic ones that we'll go over today, and we'll look at a demo of one of them as well. So the first one is animate blank state. So this is the blank can be like float, int, DP, anything. So the example I have here is float. So what animate float as state does is we give it a target value and it goes from the initial value to the target value in like a constant like smooth change. So I'll explain it with the syntax right here. Oh, sorry. So this one I have right here is an animate int as state. So we have a target value, right? So what we want, like what we pass this in as the size of a box. And we want it to be 200 if the box is supposed to be large, so it's large. And we want it to be 100 if it's not supposed to be large. And then when the button is pressed, we change with like whether it's large or not. So we toggle like the value, the Boolean value. And what this function right here does is it transitions from like one value to the other value smoothly. So in like if you like actually like run this on your on your computer, which we'll do later on, you'll see instead of immediately changing the size of the box, it's a very smooth transition, so it's more visually pleasing. And I have two examples here to see how we can do the same thing using two different functions. So here we have animate int as state, and here it's dp as state, right? So the main difference here is the value size we use here. Here it's passed in a size.dp, but here it's just size because it's already like a dp value, right? But they both essentially do the same thing. It's just changing like the size of the square by like a smooth transition. Does anyone have questions about this so far? Okay, we can keep going. And this is the second function we're looking at, animate content size. So this is placed in the modifier, and what this does, it basically animates any change to like the content size. And it has to be placed before any change, any like size modifiers that you place in modify functions you place in the modifier. So you see here, oh yeah. So here we have animate content size in the modifier before the height and width like modifier functions. And the height and the width are changed depending on whether it's expanded or not. And because we have this right here, it will make the transition smoother and like it'll have a better animation with the transition. It essentially does the same thing as the previous function. It's just another way of doing it, I would say. And the next one is animate content. This is what we'll be using for the demo today. So I don't have the code right here, but what animate content basically does is it changes, like it goes from one content body to another content body in a smooth animation too. So it takes a target state and it determines like what content to display. So let's say your content, your counter changes from 1 to 2. Instead of just having an abrupt like change from 1 to 2, we can use animate content to change it smoothly. And we'll go over a demo at the end of the lecture so you guys can actually see how it works. And the last function we're looking at is animate visibility. So as the name suggests, it animates the visibility of any composable function. So like we can say animate visibility, and then we can have enter and exit transitions. So basically what this does is you pass in the transitions, and when the visible, like when we when the visible Boolean changes, if it's visible, it enters using this transition. And when it changes to not visible or false, it exits using this transition. I think that's all of the functions we're looking at here for animations. I know that was really quick and really fast. So do you guys have any questions about this so far? Okay, we can keep going. So this is not related to our previous topic at all. This is also going to be really quick because it's not as important since we're using Jetpack Compose. But what the activity life cycle? I don't know why I have this before the actual explanation. So the activity life cycle is basically the life cycle of any activity. So we discussed in the first lecture that an activity is basically, let's say, the screen of your app, like the screen you see on your app. So each, like all of these activities have a life cycle. So they get created, they get paused, and they get deleted or destroyed. So this is the activity life cycle of any activity. You guys don't have to memorize this or study this at all. It's just a visual for you guys to understand how it transitions from one state to another. So here it transitions from starting to running when this function is created, when this function is called, and then running to pause when onsaved instance state or on pause is called, and then so on. Um, I'll be discussing one of these functions because this is mostly what you'll be seeing on your code when you when you write code for an app. So you guys might have noticed this function right here in your main function of like any app, right? So what it does is it basically creates like the screen of the app and it handles all the basic startup logic and after on create it invokes like it runs on start after on create is completed and then the app is started and I won't go over all of these in the lecture but I have slides for all six of them and it should be posted by the end of this lecture so you guys can take a look at the slides after the lecture if you want to know what each of these functions do. I think that should be it for those two. Do you guys have any questions so far? Okay. So intents. What are intents? So intents are basically an action, like a description of an action to be performed. So we request for an action to be done, and an intent when we start the intent, the action will be done. And in Android native, intents are used to communicate between different screens of the app, but navigation is done differently in Jetpack Compose, and we'll go with that in a later lecture. So intents are mostly used to communicate between our app and an outside app when we're using Jetpack Compose. And yeah, so there's two kinds of intents, an explicit intent and an implicit intent. So as the word suggests, an explicit intent they provide like a specific component or a specific action to be like a component to be invoked. So basically you use explicit intents when you know exactly what you want, like which app you want to open or which screen you want to open. That's why it's mostly used in like Android native because we want to like switch from one specific screen to another specific screen. But we don't really use that for switching between screens in Java Compose. So mostly we'll be using it for opening a very specific app. And implicit intents, we give it a task or an action, and we trust the intent to pick like the best app to perform the task. So let's say you want to share a text with someone, and you might have noticed in apps when you press the share button, it opens like a list of apps for you, and you can click on anything. That's basically what an implicit intent does. So we don't know the exact destination, but we give it the action, and then it chooses the destination for us. And yeah, so I think yeah, I basically explained the same thing previously. And Google does provide a list of different like actions we can perform. So if you go to this link, you will see all the things you can do with intents. We'll go over a couple of them today in the demo if we have time. But yeah. And oh, okay, we already have an example. So this is a syntax for an implicit intent. So first, you have to create the intent, this which you call like intent, and then within the intent, you specify the action. So in this case, the action is to send something. And then the type of the intent, so like the text, like the type of the intent is text plain, and then you can put extra information. So if you want to send a text, you want to put some extra text in there, right? So you put the extra information by calling intent put extra, and then this is the information that you're sending. And then to start the intent, you just call start activity and then pass the intent into it. And I think I have a demo. Let me just scoop it. Yeah. So when you press send text, it opens all of the apps that you can use to send a text. Then using that, when you press on the app, it'll just send the text to any person or any app that you specify, basically. So explicit intents, as I said, they're used when the destination is known. So if you want to open a very specific app, you would use an explicit intent. And I think I have an example. Yeah. So the syntax is slightly different. You create the intent the same way, and the action is action view because we're viewing an app. The action also might differ depending on what you want to do with the intent. Um, I would I would suggest taking a look at all of the actions, all of the possible like intents that's provided by Google. But in this example, we're trying to open Spotify. So the intent is created using the same way using action view, and then the data here you pass in the name of the app that you want to open. And then set package, this is the important part of this intent. So you pass in the package name of the app you want to open. And where you can find this, I'm not 100% sure about this, but what I usually do is when you open the Google Store, like Google Play link for the app, what's after ID equals is the package name of the app. So you use that in set package. So basically what it does is it sets the package that you want to open. And then like last time you start the activity by calling like start activity intent. And when you click on the button, it'll just open Spotify for you. Mm, that was not a good demo. Yeah, it's not very clear, but I'm pressing the button here and then it's opening Spotify for me. Um, I think that might be all for intents. That was somewhat of a tricky subject. So do you guys have any questions so far? All right, we can keep going then. Um, so this and the last one, they're kind of related. So let's talk about the manifest file. So I'm not sure if you guys have noticed that. Let me just pull up the manifest file on Android Studio. 1 second. So basically what the manifest file is that it contains all the information about the app. So the app name and all the activities, and more importantly to our topic here, all the permissions that you will be requesting and all the software requirements. So all of the activities are also declared. Usually it's done automatically, but there are some cases where you have to do it manually in case something goes wrong. But let me find the manifest. Yeah, so it's this file right here. It's in this folder called manifest, and it's called Android manifest XML. And so so you see how all of the activities are mentioned here, and you have all of the like information about the app in this file, right? Um, so we go back to our slides. Yeah, I also have an example of it. It's the same thing. Um, what we want to talk about today is permissions. So what are permissions? So permissions would be anything we would use on like the device that we need the user's permission for. So let's say we want to use the device's like location for our app. We would need to ask our user for permission, right? Because we can't just track their location without asking them. I'm pretty sure that's illegal. And even for internet use or user storage, anything we would need to ask for the user's permission. So why the manifest file is important is we would have to specify all of the permissions that we're asking for in the manifest file. So this is the syntax of adding the permission. You don't have to memorize this. It's the same syntax for like all of the permissions. This is the only thing that changes. So basically, this one right here is internet permissions, and these two are location permissions, and this is camera permissions. And all of these oh, go like, okay, this is a bad one. They go right here in the manifest file, and you if you would have to specify all of these permissions before you do anything with any of these like location or internet. And there's two kinds of permissions, right? So there's normal permissions that are like not as not as dangerous. So they're low risk. So like internet permissions. Most of the apps use internet, so it's like a normal permission. And then there's dangerous permissions, which would in some cases like you have to ask for them before using them in all cases. So location, camera, as I mentioned, the dangerous permissions, you have to specify them. They're not automatically granted. But yeah. So when we're working with permissions, we have to make sure that we like take into account all the possible situations with permissions. So let's say we ask the user for permissions, right? The user can deny all of the permissions, or the user can deny some of the permissions, and the user can allow all of the permissions. We have to take into account all of these possibilities and work with all of them. So we have to make sure in our app we like we have an action for all of these situations. So let's see how we actually ask permissions, right? Oh, this is also a a flowchart for like whether or not you should ask for permission, I guess. So if you can just provide the functionality without the permission, you just do it. And if you can't, you should declare the permission. And then if it's a runtime permission, you have to ask for the permission. Like we had to make a request to ask the user permission, which we'll learn in the next slide, I think. And then, yeah, you're good to go. So for permissions, we'll be using a library called Accompanies, which makes it so much easier for us. Um, so this library basically helps us handle anything to do with permissions. So before starting, we would have to add this dependency to our build or Gradle Kotlin like file. I think we haven't really done this before, so I'll actually show where the file is. If I can find the cursor. Yeah. So you see this under Gradle scripts, you see this file right here. This file has pretty much all of our dependencies. So you see all of the like everything that's under dependencies, it's basically what dependencies we'll be using in the app. Um, I think I have like a couple of extra ones. I don't think you need all of these, but this is where you would add the dependency for accompanies, this line right here. And then you have to declare all the permissions in the manifest file, like I mentioned earlier. And then this is the more important steps of how to create permissions and then ask permissions. So we want to create permissions as states. And why do we want to do that? We want to do that because we want to show any changes we want to reflect any permission changes in the UI. So we would have to create it as a state. And so permissions, you can create them as a state using remember permission state, and then you would have you would pass in the permission type in here, but like referring to the manifest of permission and the permission type. So access find location in this case. And then if permission is not granted, we would have to request permissions, right? So this is how we do it. So a conference makes it so much easier for us. We can just check just using this simple line of code, we can check if the permission is granted, and if it's not, we would request permission. So this line right here checks whether the permission is granted. And then if it's granted, we don't have to do anything else. We're good to go. We can go on with the rest of our app. And if it's not granted, we would have to request permission, right? So using the permission state we made earlier, we launch a permission request. And then when this is launched, I'm sure you guys have seen like when you open an app that uses your location, you get like a pop-up that's like, oh, this app uses your location. So this line basically like shows the user that pop-up, and then the user can pick like, oh, allow at all times, deny at all times, or allow only when using the app. And yeah, that's all for the lecture. As for permissions, the demo for permissions will be on Wednesday, but the demo today will be on animations. So I don't think I have a slide for the demo, but I'll explain what you guys have to do. It's pretty simple. Let me wait 1 second. You guys can like get Android Studio started on your laptops in the meantime.
Okay, it's working. Seems fancy. Huh? Seems fancy. Animations.
Yay.
The example is the same thing as my demo. Bit of different. The example, like this is the same as my demo. Also, like kind of pointless. Oh, oh, you can still put it up there. It's yeah.
Okay. So what I want you guys to try is, so we have a button that would increment our counter, right? And notice when the button is pressed, the 0 changes to a 1 in a very smooth transition. So that's what I want you guys to try and implement. And what we will be using is animated content, and I have the syntax right here. Um, and basically what you would want is you would want to have a text composable, and then the value of the text composable changes, but you want the text composable to be an animated content. You want it to be inside the animated content function. And I would go over something that'll basically make the transition like, let's say you wanted to slide in from one side and slide out from the other side. I'll go over that at the end of the demo, but I'll give you guys like 5 minutes, 5, 10 minutes to work on this because it's pretty similar to the example up here. But yeah.
It's all together. That's cool. I know. I really don't use it. You can use like plus operator to add transitions too. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's good. So cool. I know. This is just copy and code to me. Maybe there's like a bonus. This could be. Let me see if I can find. Right, this one. Use the. Actually, that's really useful. Or you could. It's like a thing you can do. It's actually. Or you can like. Security. It's not. I did this because those are examples of the slides. So it's really I think it's my side easy list. All the other items like to go in instead of jumping into the list. Like it's like what it's really like something you can easy list. Scan out. Different from heritage. Yeah. Reanimation.
Oh yeah.
Of course. Mm, where's my cursor? So
The slide in and slide out. Since what you guys have to do is pretty similar to this code, I'll give you a small challenge. So let me see if I can find the syntax for this here.
no,
Okay, so I'll go over the solution real quick because there's something else that I want to show you guys. Um, okay, so it's pretty much the exact same thing as the syntax I put up on the board. I didn't realize it was the same thing. So basically you have a variable and then you can ignore like the box and the columns. Well, the column is important. It has to not overlap, but the text is an animated content. So there's a target state, which is the count, and then you can ignore this line for now. I'll explain that in a second. And so you have a target state, and then you use like the target state you can access using this right here, and then you can pass it into the text variable text composable, and then that's basically going to change the what's shown on the composable in a smooth transition when the value is changed. And the value is changed is in the button. We learned on-click functions last week, so the count is incremented when the button is clicked. So I want you guys to hover over the animated content and like read the specific documentation real quick. Do you guys notice this right here, the transition spec? So, oh, so what this does is it basically you can add like what kind of a transition you want. So if you wanted to slide in from one side and slide out from the other side, or if you wanted to fade in and fade out, you can do that using this. So I'll give you guys a couple of seconds. You can also like Google syntax if you want, but it's right here. Try to see if you can add some like like any kind of an animation, any kind of like a interesting animation, like a sliding in or a fading in to this animation that you just made. Okay, I'll explain this real quick as well. So the transition I have here right now, so I'll run the app again because I changed it a little bit. So basically, the transition spec adds like what kind of a transition you want or like how much time you want the transition in. So like this function right here, you can add how long the transition runs for. But what I have here is just like what kind of transition you want. So what we have first is the entering transition. So right here I have slide in. So it slides in and it also fades in. So you can add multiple transitions, so like the enter transition or the exit transition using the plus symbol right here. So if I say plus again, I can have some other kind of transition here that would also like get chained with all these transitions. So it'll slide in while fading in, and then together with basically connects the enter transition to the exit transition. So it's the same thing, slide out horizontally and fade out. So basically this transition, what this whole function does is when it enters, it slides in and fades in, and when it exits, it slides out and fades out. And notice this, the minus, like the minus symbol right here. So what it does is it changes the like direction it slides in from. And by default, I believe it slides in from the right to the left. So when you have minus here, it's going to slide in from the left, slide out from like the left side instead of going to the same direction. See if I can. Yeah. So yeah, so notice how it's sliding in and also like fading in and fading out. And yeah, that's basically what the transition spec does. I'll show you how it looks without this. It won't be that big of a difference because our text composable is pretty small, so you won't be able to see it very well. But on bigger components, it'll be pretty noticeable if you add like the slide in or if you don't add slide in. Yeah, it's very subtle. It's not a big difference right here, but just know that you can add different kinds of transitions using the transition spec like in the function. And yeah, that's pretty much it for the lecture. If you guys have any questions, come to us and ask. And make sure to submit P2 again and P3 is this Sunday. And yeah, that's it. I'll have the syntax up for a sec.
Yeah. You know, when like you're always like looking back at the board to like when you're coding. I can't see that. But like if you zoom in far enough, maybe it can be I guess. I tried. I tried that one. Oh really? Yeah. And it's so, it's like yeah. Too small. Almost like that's a shame. Can you see it? Can you read it? Not really. Not at this size. No. Like if you really zoom in, maybe it'd be possible. Where's zoom in? I wonder how it works. That thing goes. Wait. Stop. Record. Yeah.